Hello, welcome to the meeting of Environment Committee. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note that this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page on the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Okay, thank you. So we're going to start with the appointment of substitutes. I believe we have a few.
Yes, Chair. This evening we have Councillor Jagger for Councillor Holmes, Councillor Mace for Councillor Kinnersley and Councillor De Serra for Councillor Scott. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest? I don't see any, so I'm going to take that as none. And so we move on to item 3, which is public participation. And we have one member of the public. Welcome, Patrick. If you'd like to turn your microphone on, and we're willing to listen to you. How long have you got? You've got 5 minutes.
Hello, good evening, everyone. I'm sorry Adam's not here, because I'm blaming him for half of this problem. He got me into this. I had to substitute for him some while ago when he couldn't attend a meeting. We've had a development at Windsor Avenue allotments which has not gone as well as it might have done, and we've got other problems there. I've particularly got problems in that I don't think I'm being very fairly treated by the management. I'm assured everyone gets treated identically, but I seem to be subject to more attempts to terminate my tenancy than anyone else. And the last one, I think, was particularly ill-founded, very vexatious and vicious, I thought. I think the letter that was written to Sean, and Sean and Robin, did not portray a fair or realistic aspect of the matters. I'm very unhappy with that. I'm also getting to the stage where...
I'm sorry, Patrick, I've just been advised that it needs to be you need to restrict your comments to generally things to do with the remit of the committee and not particular things about concerns you have about the way that you've been treated.
The affairs in particular at the Windsor Avenue site. Right, the first concern there is the fact that we are not subject to the standard terms and conditions of the tenancy agreement. That I was profoundly affected in that I was given a shed by a friend and a neighbour, and apparently the terms and conditions which relied on you having 30 days from the termination of the tenancy on the 30th of October, did not apply, and there was another tenant that was equally affected, and I think she should be compensated. She was planned to give it to her niece, and she was told that it was no longer hers because it had reverted to the council's ownership at the termination of her tenancy, which normally prescribes that there are 30 days from the termination of the tenancy for tenants to remove their property and produce from the allotment. And she was told that her allotment had been let on the first of the month, and that she was no longer allowed to give it to her niece, which is not this case in all the other allotments within the estate, and I think this something should be looked at and sorted out. There is also a matter of a tenant-tenant dispute, where you are not apparently allowed to know what the terms of the dispute are, what the complaint about you is. I was subject to this. I was also subject to a complaint of myself acting in a criminal fashion in relation to what I call a slasher, and it's a normal horticultural implement that I'd been using, and I was accused of using it and threatening, I believe, 2 individuals. It was subject to a police complaint, but we're still in the situation now where one of the individuals is having the allotment office write to me and ask that I don't go to the allotment at certain times because she is frightened that I shall be doing her a mischief, which I think is somewhat a slanderous allegation. It appears that the investigation wasn't fully investigated, and I'm not sure what the service manager did, but she wrote to me on 4 occasions in November and December, making allegations which didn't appear to have been in the brief of the gentleman that was investigated the complaint. We've also got a very unsatisfactory situation up there with regard to the roadway and the track surfaces, which I hope we were hoping to have the committee go and have a look at the situation, because you felt that, Ms. Lady Chair, that there needed to be some remedial work done that was going to involve expenditure. I hope that's still on the cards. It's certainly no better. The material used was totally inadequate, and it does need rectifying. And we've had the position of the gates, which are just the same as they were. The enhanced gates are severely, well, very much of an inferior nature to those that were originally there when the development started. I think that's probably enough. Have I had my quota?
Thank you very much. I've noted down 5 distinct points that you've raised there that you will get, and we will review the tape to make sure that I haven't missed those, but I've written down 5 points that you've made there. You will get a written response. The timescale for that is within 20 days.
That would be very kind, thank you.
We will. I've got 5 things pointed down that you've noted, but we will review the tape and you will get a written response. Thank you very much for your time coming tonight.
Right.
And I think members will be aware that we have had conversations about Windsor Avenue allotments when we had the allotments report, with the particular report about some of the improvements that are ongoing on that site. Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. We're going to move on to looking at the minutes of the meeting. Do we have any comments on the minutes? Councillor Lewin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just thought it was worthwhile. In the minutes we talked about the UK 100, and I just wanted to say that already Becky and I went to the UK 100 conference in Birmingham last week, and so we've already benefited from a free place at it, and I think Becky found it really useful. Thank you.
So it's already proven popular. Are there any other comments?
Yeah, I think it's already been fixed on the website, but there was on page 4 of the UK 100 membership, it says that the paid membership would provide value for money, but the preamble, I think, suggests that we already realise many of the benefits of paid memberships through other subscriptions. So I believe that quote should be: paid membership would not provide value for money.
Thank you very much, and your eagle eyes did spot this, and I understand that this version that I'm being asked to sign has that amendment made into it. So when I sign these off, they've already amended it, so thank you for spotting that. Any other comments on the minutes? In that case, I will sign those off and hand them back to Margaret, and we will move on to the presentation on water quality. We're absolutely delighted to have the Environment Agency here, and they're going to give us a bit of a presentation, but I'm going to pass to Dave Sutton to introduce the item and give members a bit of a reminder of where this came from.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall that they received a presentation on flooding and flood strategy at a previous Environment Committee a little while back, and there was a lot of interest from members and a discussion around water quality as opposed to flooding issues. I'm really pleased to have Martin Quine with us this evening from the Environment Agency. Martin is the place manager for Herefordshire, Shropshire and Gloucestershire, actually, not Worcestershire. He lives locally, but he's come along because it's very close for him to come and attend, and he covers all the areas of interest and technical specialism that we want to discuss around water quality. He just doesn't have that local responsibility, but everything he's going to talk about is applicable to Worcester and the waterways of Worcester. So I'll hand over to Martin to begin his presentation. Thank you.
Evening everybody. Thank you for the invite. I don't cover Worcestershire, but many of the issues that we'll talk about this evening are very relevant to all rivers, the environment and the role that we do. So in terms of the topics which I'll cover tonight, so start with talking about some of the key pressures that are facing the environment, a bit about our role and the context within that. Then I'll talk a bit about water quality. I'll cover some information on some of the local rivers. There's a lot of information that's already publicly available, and we've got some links where you can go and look at any very specific information that you may wish to find. A bit about River Severn, source of pollution, our role regulating agriculture, and quite topical at the moment, the water industry. I covered prolonged dry weather because of the current situation we're in. I thought it may be of interest to the committee this evening. Some bits on invasive species, fish, and then questions at the end. I would say probably about 10 to 12 minutes, but feel free to ask questions. So what are the key pressures facing the environment? So permitted discharges. So the Environment Agency has a role in issuing permits to allow discharges to the environment. When you flush a toilet, the water will go to a treatment process, it will then enter our river systems. The permits have a set criteria, which means the discharge should not cause deterioration to the receiving environment. And shortly we'll talk a bit about some of the work that's ongoing to improve what is the current status quo. Water companies are key to that, similarly agriculture. There's a lot of pressures from both those two sectors, and they're the key sectors that I'll focus on this evening. So what's our role? We have teams that are out in the catchments, so across the counties. They assess compliance with those permits. They monitor rivers, so they'll sample. We have got a lot more technology now, so we do have, in some of our rivers, remote devices which give us real-time information, and that can tell us whether dissolved oxygen levels are low. It can also tell us where you've got problems or peaks. We tend to use them where we get repeated incidents to build that intelligence picture around what's going on, noting we can't be there all the time. Partnership working, particularly through the catchment partnership. There is one for Worcestershire, as for the other counties. They're a collection of statutory organisations as well as environmental organisations that come together to look at that commonality in terms of habitat restoration, water quality improvements, and all that information, if you're interested, is all available on their website. Thought I would also just finally mention climate change. So climate change is happening. We are seeing increased river temperatures. I've been at the Environment Agency just done 19 years. We're seeing river temperatures increase, which isn't conducive to fish. We are seeing longer, wetter winters. So we're seeing rainfall totals that, not necessarily more rain, we're seeing a lot of rain come in a very short period of time. The problem that can happen is particularly during the summer where it's dry, you get increased runoff, but also you get soil loss. So climate change is something that certainly catchment partnerships look at in terms of how can we make catchments more resilient into the future. Okay. So Water Framework Directive, so that's the principal legislation of how we categorise whether rivers are good, poor, moderate or in between. Introduced in 2003, and what the Water Framework Directive does, it categorises a river into different elements. So what I mean by that, so it'll have a classification for invertebrates. So it will say how good are the invertebrates in that river. It will also look at whether that river is natural. So if you look at some of our local rivers, they're quite canalised, so then they're not the natural course of those rivers that once was. That will attract a score. They'll also assess for chemicals and also plant species. So those categorisations give an overall score of whether a water body is good or not. The system we have means that if one element fails, so if you fail on invertebrates, the whole river fails. So it doesn't mean that 14% of rivers are only, they're all really poor. What you find is that some of those rivers may have historic chemical failures, so with decades in the future, they'll naturally resolve themselves. We've got some really, really good rivers, and we've got some that need some work. Noting that none of England's rivers are good chemical status. Some areas it's because of mine work, it's not so relevant around here. Other areas it's legacy industry, where we've got connections between landfills or those historic activities of our forefathers. And I would mention bathing waters, not so relevant for Worcestershire, but we have got 3 relatively new bathing waters, Ludlow, Ironbridge and Shrewsbury, so further up the catchment. And our role there is to assess more around the coliform, so the E. coli and the things that cause harm to make people unwell. So this information is all publicly available. We can share the links after. So I pulled up the relevant one for Worcestershire. So it's just the section of the water body above Worcester. How we work is, under the classifications we give rivers, they're all separated into the water body. So you don't look at the whole River Severn. It would be sort of middle Severn, upper Severn, lower Severn. So all that information is publicly available. If you move to the next slide, please. And then what you see then is an indication of what that river is. So it gives you each element and tells you whether it's good, high or moderate. Below that, there are chemical failures. So this on the screen here is for the River Severn. It isn't uncommon to find some of the pressures at that sub-catchment level, so the smaller rivers that go into the larger rivers. We know that larger rivers have really good dilution. The River Severn itself is what we call a regulated river. So flows are supported in the River Severn through reservoirs in Wales, but also through the Shropshire Groundwater Scheme. And that means we have to legally maintain a minimum flow at Bewdley in order to ensure there's sufficient water for public, but also for the environment. So what you see at some of the larger rivers isn't necessarily the same as those smaller ones. And we'll go into just a couple of local watercourses now. So if we then compare this to the Lawn Brook, obviously local to here, so you can start to see actually this river here fails on invertebrates, it fails on fish. So some of the biological elements. As previously mentioned, some of those reasons for failure are to do with point source discharges. Sometimes it could be misconnections, sometimes it could be natural modifications which have been undertaken in the past, but also chemical failures, as I've already described, where the course of time will improve things. And if we go to the next one, just to show you another one, I've also included the Barbourne Brook. Some slight improvement. Those of you who know the Barbourne Brook will know it's very heavily modified, so it doesn't take the natural course of what it once would. We have got really good examples where rivers have been restored, so the natural flow of what we call the paleo channel, so the flow it once took, have been restored to give that natural meander, and catchment partnerships, they have a key role in to support in some of those sort of ambitions and aspirations. Next one. So if we look then at the River Severn, so this is from our monitoring at the Worcester Bridge. What you will actually see, this is over, it's really small there, but this is over a 20-year period. The horizontal line is our average, so that's the average for the year. And what you can see is actually a downward trend in phosphate levels. So that's a key indicator of water quality. We know that over the course of decades, the water industry has done a lot of investment in terms of those discharges. There's still work that's ongoing. And therefore, what you see is that natural trajectory in terms of phosphate levels coming down. Next slide, please. So I put this in here, but I can describe what it's showing. So what this is showing is, so the pie charts, if you like, are showing what we call the apportionment. So what this tells us is within those river catchments there, so each of those circles represents a river catchment. It tells us what are the reasons for the failure. So where is it coming from? And for Worcester, we're really looking at what we call a split, or what we call it source apportionment. We say that 58% of pollution comes from diffuse sources. So what we mean by that is agriculture, so the application of nutrients to fields. Some of those applications have happened decades in the past. They're not necessarily new applications now. So agricultural pressures compared to what we call point source. So point source is what comes out of the pipe, like a water company, a private system. It's around 42%. Normally we add a bit of highways, which is normally a lower amount, particularly a problem in some of your more urban cities, Coventry's and the like. Next one, please. So we have got some new technology that we've been using over the last couple of years. So traditionally, we would have officers walking lengths and lengths and lengths of our rivers, looking at where some of the pressures are, where the bad practice is coming from. And we have heavily invested as an organisation in getting some data and some imagery which can support our prioritisation. So what you can see in the images there is satellite data, which tells us which fields are bare. We can then, in the diagram below, apologies, it's probably a bit far away from some of you, we can then look at the gradient of slope. So is the slope of the field a high gradient and therefore higher risk, particularly if you've got a river flowing down the bottom. And that means we can target our regulatory staff, our people, in the right places. Now, some of the issues we're finding with agriculture is a lack of soil testing. Farmers have to test for nutrients, they have to plan their applications. So when a farmer has a crop, they have to apply that crop based upon what the crop needs. If you apply over that, that's when you can risk loss to the environment. We have issues in some catchments where soil loss is a big problem. And then the final two on the screen there are more around the common infrastructure type issues, farmyards, silage, storage and things like that. The Good thing is that over the last 3 years, we've got a new agricultural team, and that new agricultural team are dedicated and specialists to regulating agriculture. So we've increased our agricultural inspections significantly. Last year, we did 423 farm inspections across our West Midlands area. The majority were in the Severn and the Wye. And those officers are going out and they're inspecting the records, they're identifying the problems and working to address those. Similarly, water industry regulation. So we've now got, across the Environment Agency, we've got 46 new teams who are specific to regulating the water industry. Severn Trent being relevant for here. We aim to achieve around 2,000 inspections by 26-27. There is a big focus on what you often see as termed as CSOs, so combined storm overflows. So those all have monitoring requirements now, they're permitted. So essentially we know when they are discharging, we also know when they shouldn't be discharging. The big issues come is when CSOs discharge in what we call dry weather flow. So what that basically means is that when you get a heavy rainfall, CSOs were designed to effectively stop the sewage backing up into people's homes and property. So remember, it's historic infrastructure. The issue becomes, so when you get high rainfall, you get high dilution, is when they discharge outside of that period. And the work we're doing at the moment is very much focused on the water industry and getting sort of significant numbers of inspections, but also taking the enforcement action where that's required. Looking at what we've done this year, so between, I've got some data just for this evening. This year we've done around 110 inspections. So we've got, you know, good people out, they're all trained, they're all regulating the sites. The piece I mentioned on the screen there is the water, what we call the WINEP, the Water Industry National Environment Programme. So a brief summary is essentially that's the Environment Agency's review of what goes into water industry plans. So what are they going to do in order to make improvements to their works, their treatment processes? That's all then reviewed by Ofwat, and that's when you get the bills and the charges that are decided based upon that. So in terms of sort of the local flavour then, so if we looked at the last programme, so they're 5-year programmes, so we've just gone into the new programme. We call them AMPs, Asset Management Plans. We've just gone into the new one. So the last AMP looked at improvements to sewage treatment works in Hallow and focusing on phosphates, and also some further ones outside of the Worcester district. For the current AMP, so where we are in now, between now and 2030, there is some improvements to, and I haven't got all of this, again, it's all publicly available, Broadheath Sewage Pumping Station and also Hallow. And there are also some additional requirements for phosphate levels at the Worcester treatment works just up the way here. I did give a nod to current Environment Agency investigation with Ofwat. It's not in the public domain, it is under investigation. That is still continuing in the background, and that's looking at whether the water companies have reported what they should have reported in a very brief summary there. Okay, so prolonged dry weather. So it won't have escaped everyone's notice that we've had a lack of rainfall. So just a bit of context, February to April, dry since 1956. So we have a team at the moment looking at what we call prolonged dry weather. So prolonged dry weather is a stage before drought. 2022 was the last time we were in this similar situation this time of year. We have what we call a drought plan, and that effectively gives us triggers to at what point we may have to put restrictions in. So those triggers could be where we have to restrict abstraction from agriculture, because we need to make sure there's sufficient water for the key industries, water for public supply that need it, but also for the environment. And as mentioned already, Shropshire Groundwater Scheme provides water from the groundwater. Now, the good thing is that groundwater levels are in a good place, helped, if you like, by 2 wet summers and 2 relatively wet winters. So at the moment, I mean, there's some links on there which gives a bit more context, but at the moment, we don't expect to imminently go into drought, but I could leave here today and then we could be in a different situation. It's a moving picture, but at the moment where we are this evening, that's the status of where we are at. We've just adopted a new system, actually, to report water pollution incidents online. So up until now, we have a call centre in Sheffield. It operates 365 days of the year, 24 hours a day. Members of the public can phone that number and they log a report. So it was about sort of 3 to 4 weeks ago. We've now produced an online reporting tool where members of the public can provide information on through our gov.uk website. Now, the incident response role of the Environment Agency, we triage incidents, we respond to the highest category incidents. We're doing a lot of work at the moment because of fish and low levels of water, and it is a key role, and we have staff on standby 24 hours a day. So we'll have people on duty as we speak that respond to in the evenings and over the weekends. Now, when we talked about a presentation, floating penny walk came up, but it's not quite so relevant actually for Worcester. It's more down into the Avon. So floating penny walk is a bigger problem there. There's a lot of work happening at the moment with riparian owners, Avon Navigation Trust, Canal and Rivers Trust, to effectively try to eradicate it. Generally speaking, you start upstream and you work down, because otherwise it can repopulate. So there's a huge amount of work. It causes, clogs up rivers. Our role really comes in if that presents a flood risk. Himalayan balsam comes up also a lot, and again, the Environment Agency doesn't necessarily have a role in the invasive species. A lot of eradication of Himalayan balsam is done through more like friends of or community groups. There are many out there that do they call it balsam bashing, so they effectively whack the heads before they go to seed. If you've seen them, they pop and they spread the seeds quite a distance. And similarly, some partners through catchment partnerships, they'll do specific work on tackling some of your non-native species. And then just as a final one then, so I wanted to talk a little bit about fish. Now, by no means I'm no fisheries expert. We know that salmon stocks are in a critical situation. We know that some of those causes are water quality, climatic, barriers to migration. And on the right here is, and many of you will probably be familiar with it, is the Diglish Fish Pass, which was a partnership between Canal and Rivers Trust, Severn Rivers Trust, Environment Agency and Natural England. And if you've had the experience of going to see it, you can see the live viewing down beneath, where you can see the fish coming up. Coarse fish, so your roach and your rudd, are doing really well. They're healthy populations. It's the salmons where there are challenges in terms of species recovery. there are separate groups working to look at some of those pressures that are particularly, and it's not unique to the UK, it's elsewhere, the pressures that are affecting salmon. The Missing Salmon Alliance, they look at all the expertise out there, trying to understand where are those pressures coming from and what's causing in those declines. The lamprey populations are doing quite well, which is another key species which we really want to see back into the river. And yeah, just a final point. Yeah, 28 different species been observed using the pass, multiple classes, different age ranges. Fish sometimes migrate within a river system, so it's not just the salmons who go right up to the top to spawn. Some fish will migrate within, a shorter section. So you do see some of the unexpected coming up the pass as well, and I think they've seen the odd otter. So that's everything I wanted to cover, and I hope that's covered it in terms of what you're expecting. But happy to take any questions.
I'm just going to say thank you for giving us such a comprehensive input in such a limited time. So thank you very much. I think that's quite impressive. I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm only seeing one person at the moment, so we'll go to Councillor Cross first.
Thank you for coming. Really useful to make contact with you. And I know that so can I just check as to who your colleague who's place manager for Worcestershire is, and but also to generally ask, in terms of funding, you mentioned about new enforcement team and some new water industry teams, and so is this as a sign of recent investment or government investment that's come in? How do you feel your workload is, and how your ability to do that relating to your budget and funding is?
So my colleague Suzanne Ward, she's taken over Worcestershire. I say taken because we've only 3 weeks ago we've taken on an additional geography. So I now cover Shropshire, Suzanne covers Worcestershire, and we can make contact. David certainly got contact details of my counterpart. In terms of resources, we have done a lot of work on our fees and charges. So what that means is that the permits that we regulate attract a higher fee, which means that we have more stable income. We have government investment for the water industry. I believe it was around 50 million. So good amount. The funding position has meant that we're much more resilient as an organisation than perhaps we would have been, going back years. Resources, we've got good resource in terms of specialist agricultural staff. We've got specialist water industry staff. When I started, we tended to be more generalist, but actually having more specialists does mean you keep your expertise, but also that you're able to really sort of dig down into some of those issues. I think perhaps additionally we could have been spread a bit thinly. And then really it's around the data side to make sure that we're modernising as an organisation in terms of using the satellite imagery, the use of more remote technology, and that's a key corporate focus over the next few years in terms of that digital transformation and how things like AI can support, like many organisations, sort of the future, if you like.
Thank you, Councillor Lewin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for coming in. We really appreciate it. I've just got a question about industrial farming, because obviously there's a trend for mega farms, particularly in Shropshire. It's been quite controversial, but recently there was a High Court ruling in favour of cleaner rivers, where planning permission was revoked by the High Court. And Shropshire Council said, well, we did consult the Environment Agency before granting permission. But I'm just wondering, what does this kind of ruling mean for you as an organisation now, when we're looking at industrial farming applications? Because you've talked a lot about historical pollution, but what about the problem of increasing pollution because of the way we're farming? Thank you.
So I can't go into the detail of that case specifically because it was very recent. In fact, it was, I think, within a fortnight ago. My understanding is that case particular looked at downstream impacts, so it wasn't just looking at the site itself. So what you have is you have a planning process and you have a permitting process. Okay, so there's two processes there. We try and aim to twin track where we can. Now, when we go through a permitting process, we depending on the location, we would do what we call a habitats regulations assessment. So that's basically looking at all the conservation features, the areas where it could cause environmental harm. Similarly, the planning process has a similar process which they go through. It gets a bit complicated because the planning process and the permitting process, whilst they try to achieve, the permitting allows you to operate, the planning says you can be there. So whilst they relatively look like they're trying to do the same thing, they both have a separate role. And often you may find that, and I'm no planning expert, but often you find that the planning has greater breadth than some of the permitting. The permit is really looking at the locality of the site, is that operation acceptable? Now, in terms of poultry in particular, very topical at the moment in terms of poultry numbers. A lot of my day jobs is actually in the Y, which again is very similar in terms of some of those issues. The Environment Agency has a role of regulating those sites that are over 40,000 birds. So anything below that is unregulated. We regulate those as normal, as you would a normal farm. I think what you see with that application was a large scale, a large intensive process, or 4 or 5 times the amount. Now, I won't comment on the legality, but what is really important when you look at any type of agriculture is where the manures are going. Because actually, a chicken unit could be on an industrial estate. It doesn't need to be on a farm. But actually, if the manures went to inappropriate locations, the pressures on the receiving environment would be the same. And some work we're doing at the moment is looking at tracking what that movement looks like. We see some manures will go directly to farmland, some go through anaerobic digestion, but then you say, well, where does the digestate that comes out the end? So it's quite complex. It's not linear, but it's really important to look at it holistically. But I can't comment on the legality of that planning application. We do have a separate team within our agriculture team that specifically looks at regulated agriculture, so your intensive units. And again, they'll have a permit, they'll have emission limits and certain controls. But also importantly, where do those manures go, and are they going to the right places? And there's been a couple of recent judgments that have been made, which at the moment we're waiting for direction in terms of what that means for our roles now, but not and in the future. But at the moment, it's a bit early to sort of comment any more than that, if that's okay.
Councillor De Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask a similar question, in that when you're talking about signage pollution, is that mainly referring to chicken farms these days, or is it still to do with cattle and sheep and other things?
Dairy in terms of your slurries. So it's about infrastructure, potentially ageing infrastructure and onward investment. Can be challenging in some farms where they have short-term tenancies. So if you've got a short-term tenancy, are you going to invest in the infrastructure that we will be asking to do? There's specific legislation around the storage and management of slurries. Generally speaking, the slurries is more what we call like a wet matter, so it's got a higher liquid content. And we've done a lot of work on poultry. We are looking very closely at slurry at the moment. Year before last, we did a specific slurry campaign. In fact, that was in Shropshire, targeting over a very short period of time farms where we know that they are either higher risk because of their location to proximity to rivers. But generally speaking, when we talk about manure management, we're talking about wherever manures are going, are they going in the right locations for crop need, whether that's slurry, whether that's poultry manure. To a certain extent, we treat them the same. I think what perhaps sometimes attracts the attention is poultry because it's got the connotation of being intensive, where actually your traditional farming, if you like, can equally be high risk if it's not managed properly. And we speak to a lot of farmers, and it's fair to say farming isn't an easy space at the moment, and that doesn't mean that we won't tackle it, but there are farmers out there, you know, really trying to do the right things, and it just sometimes takes time.
Thank you. Councillor Mace.
Thank you. I'm not going to ask about chicken farms, but having been born in Hereford and grown up in Ross and Wye and Monmouth, you know, the state of the Wye and chicken farms does matter a lot to me. That's probably one of the reasons why I'm a Green, but I'm not going to ask about it. So I have two things I wanted to ask about. One's on the River Severn between Sabrina Bridge and Ferrybank Steps. We have some issues with some residents dumping garden rubbish. Is this something the Environment Agency can remove and also take action to prevent a recurrence of? And then I'll ask my second question afterwards.
Yeah, so that won't fall under our remit. It would actually fall under the local council's remit, and it's often to do with the volume and the risk.
Thank you. And then probably the more detailed one is so I'm subbing for Councillor Kinnersley today, who represents St Clement, and Lawnbrook on the outskirts of St Clement. Yeah, I've said, I know it was in your presentation, and you mentioned about historical factors feeding into how the watercourse is rated. Are there any pollution concerns at the moment in Lawnbrook? And what information do you have for the sources of where that pollution is coming from?
So I'm afraid that's too specific for me to answer. I can go away and do that, but we've got, you know, hundreds and hundreds, thousands. I can't answer that specifically. What I can say is that we know like I covered already, the sources of diffuse, point source. So they're very generic, but I can go away and take that away. And by all means, if you want to talk about Herefordshire, we can another time.
Absolutely. So just, I mean, if you can come back to us on that information, because I think it's a very big concern to the residents in St Clement and St John's as a wider area. I know that in terms of enforcement action, I think there was somebody who was a business that was convicted of polluting the Lawnbrook. I think they were finally convicted like 5 years after it was initially started an investigation. Is that a standard timescale for enforcement? Because I guess the concern would be, you know, that polluters can get away with polluting our watercourses for many years before any enforcement action actually takes place.
So that case you're referring to? Yeah, so that case you're referring to is in Ladbroke Heath, and I think it occurred 2017, a significant fish kill, and it went through a legal process. So the challenge is so we would present a case, we present a case to court with the evidence that we've collected. There was a legal process it followed, which therefore extended the time, and particularly when we have cases that need to go to trial, which initially for that case it then meant that we had to find a slot. I think it was about a week trial, and consequently often that can be even 12 months into the future. Can't comment on the court system. So we do find that in terms of our enforcement legal process, that can mean that offences that we identify in enforcement aren't heard or sentenced quite significantly in the future. Now, we appreciate that causes frustration, because for all intensive purposes, we'll get questions from, you know, the public or, you know, councillors asking, what's happening with it? And we often commonly give a response that it's under investigation, or we can't comment on legal proceedings. And we know the frustration it causes, but that's because we have to follow that legal process. If we don't, that's when you risk the case is taking that time and they're getting thrown out in court. I think the fine on that was around 90k. So we were quite happy with the outcome of that, but also importantly, a conviction is valid as well.
Thank you. I just would like to echo Councillor Mace's request for additional information. We can't expect you to come back to us with that detailed information about Lawnbrook area, but we have had councillors from St John's raise this, councillors from St Clements, and we've also had friends of the Lawnbrook who've come to committee and raised that. So I think it is something that's a very specific local issue. And then we're going to move on to Councillor Rudge.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your talk. I found that a lot of information. I think I took in most of it. I like the bit about the phosphate levels coming down. Yeah. Sounded very positive. In the light of that, can you tell me what a good river looks like? And going back to your stats right at the beginning for the River Severn, for example, where are we at the moment? And do you have a target that the Environment Agency is sort of working towards, so that you think in 5 years' time or whatever, the Severn is going to be a fantastic river with ticks on all counts?
So I'll answer the second bit first, because I've sort of lost the first bit already. So the rivers will have a classification. So the Wye has a higher classification than the Severn. The reason is the difference between the two is one's special area conservation, the other one isn't. The classifications essentially are the level that the nutrients, if we're talking about nutrients, need to come down to in order to effectively be a healthy functioning ecosystem. In terms of, say, what a good river looks like, I was in a meeting recently and someone said, was asked the same question, and they said, well, what's a good river to you? And often people talk about, waterfalls and, meanders and things like that. But actually, a good river is one that functions. So one that has, fish can migrate easily up a river system. One that has good vegetation, good habitat, good flows. Fish need cool, reasonably fast-flowing water, and a habitat that is resilient. Now, when we talk about climate change, we know some of our rivers suffer, as we said earlier, from temperature. Therefore, actually, there may be rivers that are currently lacking tree growth, that actually, through these catchment approaches, we actually need to think about where would you plant trees. So really, every river is different, and every situation is different. Now, if we look at, say, the Severn here, it was, the weirs were for navigation purposes. So it was, for industrial use. Now, that is very different to where you've got a river, what we would call sort of near natural, which still follows its natural flow of what it once was. In terms of, say, those levels, I can't give you the levels tonight. We've got technical teams that are really good at that sort of chemistry around what that looks like. To a certain extent, we would be able to give you sort of the targets if you were interested, and how that compares. So happy to take that away if that would be of use.
Thank you. Yes, it would. My follow-up question is to do with you talked about the runoff and the old infrastructure in drains and the overflows, CSOs, being a significant problem. Is there anything that can be done about that? And is there anything that you are working on upstream to prevent a sudden flood, causing a lot of water to flow into a river very quickly and cause problems further down?
So we have what we call the Severn Valley Water Management Scheme. So the Severn Valley Water Management Scheme is a partnership between England and Wales. So it's at the very top of the Welsh border between England and Wales in the Severn. And what that project is looking at, it's got some funding, it's looking at adaptation. So what, effectively piloting different types of projects, looking at what could be a template, resilient, adaptive environment. So, for example, where you have a river that can deal with the consequences of climate change. There's a whole project. We can send you some stuff about that again if you're interested. So that effectively is looking at holding flows higher up into the catch. We know that it's really important to keep flows into the headwaters. We also know that the floods we have are more common in occurrence, particularly for the city. And I forget your second point.
It was about the infrastructure and the drains and whether...
Yeah, so mentioning the WINEP, the water industry, and I appreciate it's technical, and I've tried to keep it as plain English as possible. So the WINEP, which is the Water Industry Environment Programme. So that would consider also what we call storm capacity. So before a CSO, so that you combine storm overflow with discharge, the discharge would go into, the flows would go into storm tanks first. So that holds the water, which is then returned, once your flows stop, it's then returned back through the system and treated. Now, it's when they get at capacity, that's when your CSO will discharge, because effectively it's lost its capacity. Now, I can't comment specifically, but underwater industry investment, there is work at the moment specifically looking at whether works need additional capacity, and there are some examples of where water companies have increased their capacity to deal with flows. Modern developments, your surface water, so your roof water, is separate from your foul water. Older developments, they were combined because perhaps didn't think about what the future could look like. It can be a big problem in Wales, particularly in some of the sort of more isolated communities where, you know, everything comes into one system, and all that water which would naturally be diverted to a river ends up going through a works. So therefore you're increasing in a way, the flows you don't want to go in there, because actually the treatment work should really just be receiving the sewage. So there's a lot of historic infrastructure which can exacerbate the problem, particularly when we see some of the rainfall that we've been having over recent few years.
Thank you. Councillor Sobczak.
Thank you, Chair. Last week, Licensing and Environmental Health Committee were looking at air quality, and we discussed particulates. I think we kind of concluded that we need to do more work before we know where they're coming from, but certainly no one asked where they are going to. And it springs to mind that I wonder if the Environment Agency, particularly with these auto sensors, are doing any monitoring of particulates suspended in the water in the Severn and elsewhere, particularly microplastics, brake lining dust, tyre dust, etc.
So we do monitor for what we call them suspended solids. So we do monitor for suspended solids, because high suspended solids, so those high numbers of particles can be quite damaging for fish gills. This is particularly why soil is actually a problem, because of the fine sediment that's suspended within the river. In terms of microplastics, there's a whole new emerging, I think, area of water quality that is almost being identified in the current period we're in, to understand, well, what does that look to the future? So you pharmaceuticals, resistant, antibiotics and things like that. There's a whole piece, I think, at the moment which will evolve. The Environment Agency are looking at these type of things nationally, but I don't quite know what that direction will be in terms of microplastics and what that future regulation or what that future impact will be. It is quite early on in the process, and nor at this point have we had guidance around how or what our approach would be, as far as I'm aware this evening.
Thank you. I haven't seen any other hands up, so does anybody else want to ask a question before we draw this item to a close? I don't see any hands, so I'd just like to say thank you, Martin, for coming along, for a very succinct but very detailed presentation, and for putting up with all the questioning, and also for the homework that we're sending you away with. We really appreciate the time, and particularly in this weather. So
yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to item 6. I am aware that we still have a lot of an agenda to get through, and I think it's really important to have spent that time. We've wanted the Environment Agency to come for a while, so we didn't want to curtail that. So in terms of going forward, I am going to ask the officers to keep the summaries of the reports relatively short. I know you've all read and digested the reports and picked up every typo that could possibly be there, and I have lots of questions. So I would like to make sure we keep the time for questions. So asking officers who I'm sure won't mind if they can make the assumption that people have read the reports and keep the overview short. I'm assuming on the performance report we're going to you, Lloyd, is that correct?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So this is the Q4 performance scorecard, the last quarter of the year.
Projects and actions are all green, so either concluded or on progress. In terms of key performance indicators, there are some red indicators around waste and recycling. Just to remind members, we have reports on the agenda this evening that look to respond to those indicators. There's also a red indicator for overflowing litter and dog waste bins, and we also have a report on the agenda this evening that discusses that item as well. And the only other one I would point out, Chair, is that the satisfaction with parks and play areas, which is an annual indicator, we believe that's connected to the splash pad and the issues there last year. And I'm gripping the table. I'll say no more than that.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. Just before I open up for questions, Dave's got an update for us.
Thank you, Chair. Just thought it would be helpful just to add to, we've got an indicator on our carbon emissions. There are a couple of benchmarking organisations that look at councils and report back, and it's something in the officer team we look at, and we look at with the Chair and the Vice Chair. We've just had feedback from the Council Climate Action Scorecards produced by Climate Emergency UK last week, and it's quite a positive view on the City Council. They assess over a whole load of categories: building and heating, transport, planning, land use, governance and finance, etc. The whole range of ways in which we may be addressing sustainability. And our scores increased by 7% to 45%. The average for district councils 35%. They range between 65, 68 and 11. We're doing very well locally. Our best score is on collaboration and engagement, which I think is a testament to the team, the work that members and the team are doing around that. So we can provide a little bit more on that. Our biggest improvements around transport for a district council on the back of the Beryl Bike scheme. We can provide the link to that to members, but just thought it would be useful to pass on a little bit of good news that's not in the scorecard, but it is around our performance. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. And just before I open to questions, I just want to thank officers for, Karen and I have been quite pedantic about the scorecard, and then we say, can you add more explanation? And we have briefings and we ask questions, and then they have to go away and write a lot more. So I just wanted to say thank you for the time that it puts in. We're aware that you have limited time, but I do think it's useful to have that level of detailed explanations. Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Mace.
Thank you for the report. So I've got 3 areas I wanted to look at. Page 18 of the report pack, garden waste collected per customer. So Councillor Kinnersley asked me to ask, can we do year-round garden waste collections?
We have introduced, not quite 12 months because of the Christmas period, but we've extended the garden waste for this year, so residents will be getting that information and it'll be an extended period. So that's happening and gone through.
Is that reflected on the website? 'Cause I think it says March to December at the moment. Is that the new? Okay. Thank you. On page 27 of the report pack, on percentage of overflowing litter and dog waste bins dealt with within time. I know 76% is quite a long way from the target, and I appreciate the work that's going into improve that with the in-cab reporting and all the other things. I mainly wanted to comment on it because I used to see persistent issues with bins along the canal between Lansdowne Park and Purdswell Park. It seemed like every time I would go up and down that stretch, there would be an overflowing bin. And I was going to say I've not seen one for months at this point. However, there was one today that I reported, unfortunately. So thank you for that. And page 34 of the report pack on carbon emissions. So the positive here, 29% reduction since 2019-20, that's really good. And the coming reduction by 20% from the crematorium is great. But if we're going to hit net zero by 2030, we essentially need to cut 20% every year from here on out. So this is why projects like the solar panels on St Martin's Gate, I think, were really important, because we need a steady stream of things that are cutting our carbon output coming forward. Do we have a pipeline that's going to achieve net zero by 2030?
Thank you, sir. I think we don't have a graph that goes to net zero by 2030. We're working on a number of initiatives. You'll see from the report that the electric cremators is a substantial change. We've investigated electrification of the fleet, and members have had the information on that, something that's not going to be achievable in that shorter term. So we don't have a graph that heads to zero at that point. There's lots of work going on, and clearly we'll keep abreast of development and grant funding that may arise in that interim period.
Okay, thank you. And I do appreciate all the hard work that's gone into all the work over the years so far, but we just need to keep highlighting. Unfortunately, there's always more to do. With that in mind, how can we ensure that this target is kept by the new unitary authority, at least for Worcester?
I think the answer to that will be a matter for the elected members of the new unitary authority. Certainly the work that this council is doing now and officers are doing is to support that, and that will go into our work on reorganisation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Desera.
Thank you. As a visitor to this committee, I have to say if you and Karen have asked for more detail on the scorecard, that means I don't have any questions, which is very good.
That's really nice because that was the intention. We'll interrogate it to save everybody else having to, but I think we've got Councillor Cross, did I see your hand?
Thank you. Yes. I'll be quick because there's 5 questions, but hopefully they're all relatively quick. First one relates to Ash Dieback, please. So just, I know we've got a third of the sites done. How does that mean in terms of numbers of trees monitored that need to be monitored? So just sort of, I know we're talking about sites, which is great and brilliant to see this progress, but just trying to understand the numbers a little bit better and trying to give reassurance to anybody who might think, I'll be picking the easier sites first. I really like the scheme about having the priority rating in terms of month 1, dealing with them within month 1, 3, 6, 12, etc. So just would be love to hear more about sort of, just how we are with the numbers of trees.
Chair, the performance scorecard can't go into huge amounts of detail. We do provide an annual report on Ash Dieback where we will go into detail. So I think if we can pick that up for the next performance report to respond to Councillor Cross, or we can respond offline if that would be helpful as well. Yeah.
And then the next one was relating to page 19 of the report, talking about confusion factors. So the residual household waste and waste not being recycled that potentially could be. I actually had some lived experience of this last week. Went online to lesswasteless.com and was told that you could recycle printer toner cartridges at Bilford Road. Went there and then found that actually no, it's only inkjet cartridges, which are much smaller. Toner cartridges, they said, put them in for incineration, which just doesn't seem what it's all about. So maybe that's probably more of a county issue, but happy to help you with that battle. So, I mean, clarity, is that a county matter?
Yes, it would be.
Thank you, happy to help with you. The next one would be about fly posting and unauthorised advertisements, page 31, within the scorecards. Just trying to see how that is incorporated within the street scene standards documents, because it's mentioned in the start of the street scene standards documents, but there doesn't seem to be sort of anything operational in terms of, you have pictures and comparison pictures for the rest of it. Just wondering if that's something that needs to be added in. There seems to have been a bit of a blight of it, or spate of it this year.
I'll pick that up, Councillor Cross, and I'll look into that.
Perfect, so that's something to add in. And then at some point as well, page 28, an update on the, talking about fly tipping. I know there's some sites where we have perennial problems. One of them is in the area where I live of Offerton, at Offerton Lane. I know there's been a lot of problems ongoing there. It'd be lovely to have an update in due course, probably not for here and now, about that. And page 37, we're talking about volunteering in parks. And I'm just a little bit mindful of the news or the decisions that had to be made a couple of weeks ago about our community engagement team. Just wondering how we're going to achieve that boost of volunteering to help us with everything we need to do, which also, I guess, also includes community engagement within Ash Lieback monitoring. So how we keep that going. Thank you.
Chair, just on the first point around Offord Lane, we are working with partner agencies around trying to tackle the issues there. I won't say any more than that at this stage. And in respect of the changes to the staffing structures, we're just working through what that means in terms of what we can continue to deliver and what we do less of, and perhaps what we need to stop. And we'll brief members on what that looks like over the coming weeks.
Are those all your questions, Councillor Cross? Okay, then. We're going to go to Councillor Rudge next.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a question about page 25 to do with the environmental crimes. Some time ago, we looked at the idea of possibly introducing a lorry park somewhere so that we didn't have a lot of lorries parking along Wainwright Road. And it was, I think, David was going to write to the county to see if we could get some progress on that. I don't know whether anything has been done or whether we have any progress, but for us in that area, it's a huge problem still. Warden Womble's litter pickers most months do that area, and most months, you know, we can come away with 8 bags or 10 bags or 12 bags of rubbish, mainly along that line, the Wainwright Road area and surrounding. I wonder whether there's anything we can do to try and solve that, because it's almost got to the stage where you think, you get to say where you think, I'm not sure it's worth litter picking this same area month after month after month, because it needs to be addressed at a higher level, I think. And I don't know quite who to direct my question to, so I'm looking for some help here. But we genuinely need some help with. It isn't just lorry drivers, but so many park there, and it's bottles of urine, and it's feces, and it's rubbish, and littering, and all sorts of stuff. It is a horrible, horrible mess, and we need to try and do something if we can. So any advice or guidance or support on that would be gratefully received and gratefully appreciated.
Chair, again, as a performance report, we don't tend to go into individual cases, but we'd be happy to have a conversation with Councillor Rudge offline about that. Just in terms of reference to us writing, we did write to the County Council and asked them whether they had a role to play, and as expected, they came back and said they didn't, and that's not because of not wanting to do anything. It's not their responsibility. They don't have a statutory responsibility for that, in all fairness to them, but that has been confirmed.
Anecdotally, there do seem to be issues coming up around fly tipping. I know that I've had ones in my ward as well. I think what we really need to do is make sure that all members are regularly reporting things through Report It, so that then officers can pick that up, and if it's showing as an issue through Report It, then I'd want it be coming to this committee, and we could actually look at it as a deep dive for the committee. But what I don't want to do is creating a lot of work for officers on deep dives if it's not a genuine issue. But anecdotally, I think fly tipping is an issue. So can I just encourage all members, use Report It, make sure that we are all proactively recording those things. Thinking actually I've had a few this week which I haven't put through Report It, I've just targeted another way, but I think that's probably the most effective way that we can assess whether this is something that we need as a committee to look at in more detail. Go on.
Thank you, Chair. A quick follow-up then. I wonder whether, you mentioned in this point here about education being part of the solution, and I wonder whether there's a role for us as a City Council to try and explain to members of the public just how much money is spent on picking up litter and fly tipping for that matter, to try and encourage them to understand, I'll choose my words carefully, that someone is responsible, and in the end it comes out of their pocket and it comes out of their council tax. We have a warden on the parish council who does a lot of litter picking, and that's part of something I'm trying to do in the parish council, just let people know this is how much money is going towards your problem of litter picking. I don't know whether that's too big an ambition and whether I'm being naive and foolish, which I very often am, but it does seem to me to be something we could try and address as a council, to help people understand how much of their own council tax money is being spent on something that, you know, they can't point the finger at other people. It's a problem that we have as a city, and it's a problem that we could try and educate people to understand that we have to spend money on it.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable idea, Chair. I'm sure I'm sure we would have shared that information in the past as part of annual surveys and things. I know a lot of councils tend to do that. So we can take that away and see how that fits into the wider communications plan of the council over the coming year.
I think short term it might be timely to put a reminder out to members to make sure that we're all proactively reporting things through Report It, so that we have really comprehensive data, so that then when we do want to look at costs, we've actually got data that backs that up. Okay, are there any other questions? Any other points? Oh, sorry, Councillor Lewing. We were so sidetracked by fly tipping that you've got overlooked. Thank you for reminding me.
Thank you. I was just going to focus on satisfaction with parks, so I'm going to hold the table. Gellervart Park, we had the stakeholders meeting last week, and it was really positive actually. We're getting a lot of really good feedback from residents who are noticing with the new park warden there that there's been a real focus on improving the green space, and people are really appreciating it. And the splash pad being open is absolutely wonderful. I mean, I don't know whether, Lloyd, you also booked the weather, because it's been pretty much sunshine since it started, and it's just packed, and people are just saying again how brilliant it was. So I know that we've had a bit of a rough time with it, but actually I think now people are feeling really positive about it. One of the downside was we had a lot of negativity about using chemicals in the park, but again the City Council are addressing that. And people are feeling a lot more positive. So yeah, there's been a lot of really good work, investment in our green spaces, all the trees, you know, it's talked about in this report, all the bird boxes and everything else. Loads of investment from the City Council. I'm going to put my finger in the thing that this is going to go up, this feedback, this satisfaction for parks. I think it's got to those people just probably not going enough and don't see the change that's happened. So thank you.
Let's just hope that's replicated across all of our parks. I know the park in my ward is not as well loved and probably not got as many activities as Gellervart Park. Okay, but that's another discussion for another day. Okay, so if there aren't any other points, I'm going to move us on to item 7, and this is the progress update for on the Environmental Sustainability Strategy Action Plan and the Draft Biodiversity Strategy Action Plan.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this extremely brief and then have time for questions, I think. So this is our twice yearly update on the Environmental Sustainability Action Plan. It details progress on 38 projects. Just asking members to note, we're refreshing and updated the Environmental Sustainability Strategy. That's due to come back to this committee in November, alongside a new biodiversity strategy. And the report contains details of progress with that and a summary of the consultation that members will be aware of that we've carried out. Work's been ongoing with the steering group on the content of those strategies and action plans, so work will continue over the summer. But we will be bringing all of that, including a new action plan, to the committee in November. So I'm not going to say any more. There's a lot of detail in the report and in the appendix. I will take questions if members have them.
I just wanted to start by thanking members of the steering group for all their hard work on this, and also particular thanks to Ruth because I presume Ruth wrote the bulk of the report, and for such a detailed report. I mean, it's a time-consuming task. So, questions? Clearly a very comprehensive report because she stunned everybody into silence. Councillor Lewin.
Thank you. I wasn't quite ready actually. One thing I wanted to ask about, and I have asked officers about this, but I just want to say it publicly, that we are, in Arboretum, we're really disappointed that we cannot see the Enterprise car in the Baptist Church car park. And we haven't been able to get hold of Enterprise to find out what's happened or whether they have just left. And this is because the church actually allocate one of their spaces with a sign on it for the car. They'd quite like courtesy of being told that the space isn't needed by Enterprise anymore. Obviously, we would love Enterprise to carry on. That would be our preference. I don't know if they're still at Tallow Hill, but obviously it's extremely disappointing. But I appreciate that officers have been trying to get in touch. So really, I just wanted this to be a public call to Enterprise to actually get in contact with us, if that's okay. Yeah, okay. Then on page 51, what was I going to say there? Oh yeah, I was just on page 51, we've got the project for the cycle parking in the Arches, and it says that the project isn't going to finish till March 2026. And I know that I'm probably not alone. I'm getting so many complaints from people who don't feel like they can cycle into the city centre at the moment because of the Crown Gate secure cycle store closing. I'm just wondering whether we can do better than that. Thank you. And then, shall I carry on? Just, yeah. Page 53, we've got the local grant, New Home, Warm Homes. It said it was going to commence from April 2025 with the County Council. I just wondered if I could have an update on that, please, because we're in June. And then page 57, what have I got there? Oh, this is just a thought I've had actually, and I wish I'd had it before, but I had it today. And this is that we're looking at, through sustainable development, we're looking at new buildings. With our homes and those other schemes, we're looking at homes, and we've also done a project on industry. But one thing we're missing, I think, at the moment is commercial buildings. And this is because I believe there was, on April the 1st, this year, it became unlawful to let a commercial property with an EPC below E. And obviously, in 2028, at the moment, there's a draft standard for it to go up to a C. And I did see on a website that apparently enforcement, and I'm sure we don't want to go heavy on enforcement, what we want to do as a committee is support and obviously look at potential projects. It said it was supposed to be led by the local authorities. Of course, I don't know who that is, and I'm just wondering whether we could go back and maybe find out about the potential for some work for that. Thank you. And that's it. Thank you.
3 questions. I don't know whether you've got all of those.
I think so. Yeah, the cycle parking and obviously the loss of Ferrari Walk, an enormous amount of member interest in that, and we discussed that at a PED committee last night, quite some length. The project we've got 2 elements to it. One is to install some secure lockers in the Arches opposite Foregate Street Station under our active travel work, sits under PED, and create a mobility hub there with a number of different options, hopefully, and also see if we can look wider for an alternative or a different location to replicate what was at Ferrari Walk. I mean, the advice I gave to members last night is that's a bit of a good news, bad news story. It's a commercial unit that has been let. So it's a retail unit that has been let. Clearly, there's a value to that. Securing that with funding for cycle parking will be very difficult for the council, but we will continue to talk to partners and look for opportunities. That explains the extended date on that project. Councillor Lewin's second question, the warm homes, commencing with the County Council, that will happen, it will be proceeding. I don't have a date for you. I'm not sure whether colleagues have a specific date, but we can give you a more detailed briefing outside of the meeting on that work continuing.
I just think that once it is live, we need to put it in a briefing so that councillors understand what it is, who it benefits, and actually we can help get the right people the funding. Thank you.
Absolutely. And the third point, yes, thank you. We'll take that away as something to consider going forward in our action plan and our new strategies to what work might be appropriate to do around the EPC and commercial lettings.
Councillor Mace.
Thank you very much. So I had 2 points I wanted to raise. Which one was on page 51. No, I'm sorry, not page 51. There's a mention of a lot of our carbon reduction has been due to switching to zero emission, renewable certified energy. I was wondering if there could be a briefing note circulated to councillors or members of the committee on who our supplier is and the tariff, because I think I would like to understand the certification process for their zero emission renewable certified electricity, because I'm particularly keen to know whether it includes burning of wood chips at Drax, which I think does have renewable certification on it, because clearly, although wood is a renewable source, there is carbon emissions intrinsic of growing trees, which then it captures carbon, but then chopping them down and transporting them to Drax obviously has a carbon emissions of itself. So I'm particularly keen to know that. And the other one was, not to belabour the point over Friary Walk, was whether there's, and I'm sure this has been looked at, but whether there's any council-owned buildings that could potentially host secure free cycle parking going forward. I'm aware, for example, I think we own the building next to the Scala, which Spell and Metcalfe are currently using for their offices, whether that could be something that could be looked at once they finish the Scala project. Thank you.
Thank you through you, Chair. Certainly we can look at that. I'm aware of some of the discussion around the certification of zero carbon electricity, so that's something we'll look into and come back to you on. And regards to council buildings, I won't comment on a specific site. I would say that those do have commercial value to the City Council, so it's a similar weighing up of the costs and the benefits that would be required were we to let a commercial premises from somebody else, or forego letting an income on one of our premises.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Both questions have actually been asked and answered. So I wanted to ask about cycle parking. I'm going to throw it out there. Is there an opportunity that we could put cycle parking in the High Street at the front of in front of the Guildhall? Perhaps some rings on those bollards. Anything to help provide and also make a point that reinforces our commitments. And also, yeah, I was also asking about the Warm Homes local grant. I just hadn't seen info on the county website, and I was wondering about the April date that was mentioned. But yeah, so the live question really is, can we do more cycle parking, adding bollards, rings to bollards outside the front, like what we have outside the Museum and Art Gallery, for example?
I mean, certainly something the team are looking at is cycle parking across the whole of the city centre, and there are different modes, lockers, managed, and simple hoops. I think there are some challenges outside the Guildhall, given the historic nature of the Guildhall and the visual aspect of that. There are hoops nearby, but we can have a conversation about whether something near the Guildhall might be appropriate.
Thank you. And the one element to not forget is the public bike repair stations. I've had occasion to need to use the one at Crown Gate, and that got me out of a sticky trouble. Thank you.
Yeah, being built into our plans for the arches.
Do we have anyone else wanting to speak? If not, we're being asked just... Oh, sorry, Councillor Siddiq. Go on.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question about action plan. If we are getting electric charges points at our community centres, do you think it's be possible in future? Or?
So the first phase of our EV charging strategy, which came to this committee, has been to install, in addition to St Martin's Gate, to install chargers in Tallow Hill and King Street. We are monitoring those at the moment, monitoring their usage. We are looking at, as a second phase, potentially putting them around some other council sites. I think the shorthand really for the moment is the business case to do that. Financially, is not made unless there is grant support. When you take into account the cost of borrowing, the cost of procurement and insurance against the income that it would generate. So we are keeping an eye on that and looking for funding opportunities, but it's certainly something we're aware of, but there's nothing active right at this moment.
So I'm going to check very carefully this time that I haven't missed anyone. Apologies, Councillor Siddiq. Assuming we haven't got anybody else, we're just asked to note the progress on the Environmental Sustainability Strategy and Action Plan. And again, I'd like to reiterate my thanks to officers of all the work that they're doing. And we're also asked to note that the refreshed strategy and action plan will be coming to the November meeting along with the biodiversity strategy. So we can't not note that. So if everybody's happy, I'm going to move us on to the next item. And depending on how long this takes, we might need a short break after this item.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. So the report that I'm presenting this evening is in response to the extended producer responsibility and the grant funding that we've received. And that I would like the committee to know, obviously, the contents of the report, in particular with the expectations from the government of how we will use that money. That committee will approve the principle of utilising the funding to recruit a waste education and communication officer to undertake the work outlined within the report, and that you recommend to Policy and Resources Committee an allocation of £59,000 per year from the Service Transformation Reserve to support the salary of this new post. And we would also like to have a small revenue budget that will look at campaigns and communications. I won't go through the report in its entirety. I will keep it brief. But as we are aware, we've had several discussions around our recycling rate, and we're currently static around 37%. So there's something that we are keen to progress and improve on. And we also have domestic food waste collections that are not too far away in 2026 that will start operating on a weekly basis as part of simpler recycling. So we think that this role is vital in a long-term targeted solution in trying to increase our recycling, reduce our contamination, and look at the data that we've got and be more robust in how we are supporting the recycling service. We haven't had a dedicated resource, I think, for some while, undertaking that education and the campaigns and getting into the communities and working with individuals around waste and the audits and what needs to go in which bin, etc. So we think this is quite a impactful post that I hope the committee would support. I'll leave it there, but I'll answer any questions.
Councillor Mace.
Thank you. So I definitely support the creation of this post, because I think we can hopefully see an increase. But I think to set expectations for anyone watching this, what do we think success looks like? So we're 37% of our recycling rate at the moment. Does success look like 40%, 45%? Because I just don't want members of the public thinking we're going to get to like the highest in the country when this post is probably not going to deliver that.
I think with the additional of food waste, I think we can start realistically looking at 40, 45%. And I think if this post does those bespoke campaigns, love food, hate waste, for example, I think that will drive through the recycling messages, and I think we could see a significant increase.
Councillor Lewin.
Thank you. I'm really excited about this, actually. And I was on the waste board with Zoe. We were on the waste board, and we saw some research that the St Albans have got a recycling rate of 64.2%. And one thing that they have on their website is, if you'd like to have some help with recycling, contact our recycling officer. And you just think, that kind of, communication where you've got things like facts, like, they've got on their website, each ton of recycled paper saves 17 trees. It takes 50 times the energy of a single battery gives out to make it in the first place. An empty can will look the same in 100 years, but if you recycle it, you can use it in 6 weeks. It's impactful communication is what is important. You have to get the messaging across. Otherwise, I think it's just so easy just to not really understand and not really care. If people are unsure of what to cycle, I think the default position is that you just put it in your black bin. And so, I think this is absolutely crucial, particularly with food waste coming. We know that contamination is also an issue. So I really welcome this, and I look forward to meeting the officer once they're appointed. Thank you.
Do we have any other? Councillor Rudge.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask the sound of the 60% sort of top rates, or 64, St Albans case, is that because they're doing food recycling and they're sort of quite far ahead of us, and that potentially that could be achievable for us if we get the food recycling right?
I would never say never, but I do believe that they are also operating a food waste. I think it'll be baby steps for us, and we'll start looking to those increases over perhaps a 3-year period once we get bedded in. But yes, well, we can aim as high as we possibly can.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to manage members' expectations around where we can get to. You know, the authorities that are up in the late 50s and the early 60s are highly affluent areas. So I think, not wishing not to be ambitious, but we just need to take into account, you know, Worcester, its residents, its communities. We'll do all we can, and I think if we're approaching 45% after food waste and after the officer being in for 12 months, we'll be doing well.
Any other comments? Councillor Rudge.
Sorry, Chair, I just thought the same officer maybe could do something about litter.
I think they're potentially going to have a large enough remit with this, but it's certainly something that could be considered. So, nobody else is, I'll have to make sure I look around the room fully this time. Nobody else seems to be dying to say anything. So, we're noting the contents of the report, we can't not. Are people happy to approve the principle of utilising the EPR funding to recruit a waste education and communication officer, and therefore recommending to Policy and Resources Committee to allocate a sum of 59,000 per annum from the Service Transformation Reserve to support the salary and an associated budget, because you do need budget to be able to do communications campaigns. I'm going to ask for a show of hands to make sure that we are clear if people are happy to support that. It's really nice to see that that is unanimous and that is carried. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to suggest we have a very, very short 5-minute comfort break. Please be as quick as possible so that we
Sorry, it's me again. I'm going to call it TEEP. Again, I will keep the report brief. The committee notes the content of the report, in particular, including separate, I'll get my teeth in straight, including separate collection of paper and card by March 2026, which is part of the simpler recycling requirement, and that they approve the assessment that is in Appendix 1 as set out within this report, and confirms that as part of the Council's ongoing arrangements with County Council, the requirements to implement separate paper and card for the remainder of the existing waste management contract should be deferred to January 2029 when the contract ends. And note that this decision will also be reviewed annually. Without going in, it is a technical report, but without going into too much detail and to try and keep it as brief as I can, as part of the simpler recycling, separate paper and card is part of the requirements to be operational by 2026. However, there is some flexibility in that, and if we can produce a TEEP report that we will present to the government, that will obviously placate us to continue from a commingled service. There is lots of details in the report of the cost factors of us looking at introducing an extra collection, also the climate impact and the carbon of introducing extra rounds that would be delivering around the city, but also the county and ourselves in a contract till 2029, the county being disposal and us being the collection authority. There is a typo in Appendix 1 where it should be just for Worcester, not Worcester City Centre. So this is covering the whole of Worcester, the city itself, not just into the city. And I will leave that at that if you've got any questions.
Thank you, Sandra. I think we all acknowledge that we all want to move forward with this as quickly as possible, and I don't think anyone on this committee isn't committed to moving forward as quickly as possible, but then it's got to be balanced against practicalities. Do we have any questions on this?
I actually didn't have any questions, but I wanted to apologise for not spotting the typo.
You're slipping, Councillor Mace. We do look to you on all committees to be able to pick these out. Councillor Sobczak.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it's fair enough that we have to defer introducing a new scheme because of the arrangements we have with the county. As the Waste Disposal Authority, we obviously have our collected waste directed where to take it. The county contract, as I recall, was a 25-year PFI, and I guess that 2029 date, it means that that's when it's going to be renewed. Working back from there, that's only kind of like 4 years away, by which time we'll be a unitary authority, and looking at a project timetable that might involve financing of new infrastructure, and issues of like who owns these facilities that currently are operated by Severn Waste Services and EnviroSort. It strikes me there's a substantial number of issues which need addressing kind of in principle, in a sort of a general direction right now, leading up to a procurement which in itself could take 18 months or 2 years when you know what kind of future service you're looking for. So we're talking about a combined service of some sort of waste disposal and collection between 6 authorities that may collect waste in very many different ways that currently are either in-house or contracted out. So my question is, are we starting these discussions both with our other neighbouring collection authorities and with our disposal authority so that we get a future contract which will meet our ambitions and needs?
Thank you, Chair. conversations had commenced around the move to a new contract arrangement in 2029, probably several months ago. I think a series of workshops were held as well. Due to some staffing challenges at the County Council, those conversations unfortunately came to an end. And they are looking to be recommenced as soon as possible. The update we've had from officers at County is that given the change of politics up there, there's currently lots of briefing going on for the new cabinet and the new cabinet member in particular. And in the next couple of weeks, I think County will be in a position to update us on where things are at County. So I would see conversations commencing certainly in the next couple of months, if not weeks, back around this project.
Might it be possible to introduce a regular report back to committee on what I think is a really substantial issue, both financially and operationally, for this committee?
Chair, I think if we take that away as chair, vice chair, and myself to think about what the best way of doing that is. I know there's a push to try and reduce the number of committee reports and only make sure that we're focusing on decision reports, but absolutely, I think Councillor Sobczyk makes a really good point around keeping all members up to date, whether that's a committee report or an alternative way of doing that. We can take that offline and discuss it.
What I'd suggest is, can we put it as Karen and I have regular briefing meetings with officers. Can we have that as a standing item on our briefing? And Karen and I will then talk about what's the appropriate way to make sure that all members, because it might just be as simple as when we've had a briefing and an update, we make sure we cascade that to all members of the committee or all elected members. So it's not necessarily a regular committee report, but it's a regular update, so you're kept totally informed of what's going on. And I think we need to get better at doing that as committee chair and vice chair, of cascading the conversations that we're having with wider committee members. Do we have any other comments on or questions related to this report? If not, I'm going to suggest that we have noted the contents of the report, particularly the requirements and particularly around paper and card. Are we happy to approve the assessment at Appendix 1 and therefore be approving the exemption? Can I have this as a show of hands so we can make sure we're clear that this is something that everybody is happy with? And again, that is unanimous. And we will note that we will keep this review under annual review, which links to the point that Councillor Sobczyk is stating, that we need to keep the whole future of where we're going with recycling as we move to the unitary authority very much as something foremost in the committee's mind. Thank you. Okay, so that moves us to the final item, which is about the public bin investment programme. This came out of the conversations we've had about performance scorecards. That's why I can see fly tipping potentially going down this route as something we want to look at, where we very much felt this was something we wanted to know more about rather than just close the project off. I'm assuming this is going to go to Sandra, but could that be wrong?
No, it's me, Chair, thank you. This is a report for noting the contents, and I'm sure that everybody has gone through the report. So again, I won't go through the report in very much detail. But it was a two-phased approach with some significant funding, almost £400,000, to look at and improving the bin infrastructure within Worcester City. And the net capacity has increased to, I think, over 76,000 litres with the installations of both phases 1 and 2. And whilst I know we've had some issues last year with staffing and misuse of the bins, household waste, we are seeming to get back on top of most of the problematic bins. But we are looking for some support here because we really would like people to use the Report It app. We are almost imminent to start the numbering with the QR codes on the bins, which will help residents to identify and straight through to report it. I did want to come to committee tonight to say we'd started, but we're just waiting for them delivered, so we're imminently in the process of that. And that elected members also use that process so that we can start looking at the data, analyse where our most problematic bins are. And something that I'm quite keen to look at from a future proofing of this service is we introduced the in-cab technology for waste and recycling collection services, and that's proving quite successful in identifying areas and the contamination and the poor recycling. We think that this could probably be lifted over into the waste and recycling, and that we can start mapping the hotspots and looking at where people are misusing the bins from household waste, doing that education with the residents from a waste and recycling point of view, but then also we could follow that up with enforcement if they continue not to work with us. So I'm going to leave that report there and happy to take any questions.
Councillor De Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple, really. So, unfortunately, every request I've made to have a new bin has been turned down in my ward for a number of reasons. One of them being that there aren't any more. So, is there a plan to get any more bins at any point, particularly those that take dog waste, because dog mess around the ward is a very big problem. I had hoped that I could also get some signage up, some friendly signage to help improve people, you know, not just letting it happen. But that's all seemed to have stalled, which is unfortunate for lots of reasons. And the other point I wanted to make, I understood perhaps wrongly from a few years, from when I was first elected actually, that when you use the report it function, it feeds into a database that will help the city council. But not just that, the collection of the bins themselves. You would know by now whether or not you've got an underutilised bin that you could move. But when I queried that with the relevant officer, that was denied, that information was not available. So that sort of surprised me, because I would have thought it could be.
So I'll take that point first. It does depend on the reporting mechanism and how a resident's reported it, and sometimes they could be putting it on a different street. So the numbering of the bins, we hope now will support that, so we'll be able to see which are overflowing, which are frequently overflowing. We haven't got an infinite resource to look at additional bins. However, as part of this data gathering, we will be looking at footfall, usage, and if we've got a bin in the area that's not being used, that we'll look at relocating. We have had a bit of a backlog with some of the movement of bins due to personnel issues back at City Services, so that we have got a short backlog, but I've sat down with the Manor Works team today to say, can we get on to the requests that we've currently got there and get them moved, changed or whatever. So hopefully you'll start to see some of the requests that you've made through Report It.
One quick supplementary. I do have a query from a resident who is flabbergasted that an area that will happily take quite heavy equipment to mow and service, landscape, can't service a small bin collection lorry, which was one of the reasons given for not having a bin placed where one had, I think, would be quite useful.
Could you send me the specifics of that offline, and I'll pick that up. Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you. Just want to say I'm really encouraged by this progress, and it's very welcome. And just wanted to check, in the recent heat, a lot of the applied labels on public street bins are peeling off, particularly those, it seems to be those which have the direct sunlight on. And I'm just wondering, it's going to be quite late to sort of comment now, but just in terms of, this is something you must be aware of, and is it something that we're looking at in terms of how the QR codes and numbers are applied to the bins? Thank you.
I've been given assurances that they are a different material than we had, and that they're, I won't say they're bulletproof, but yes, they are. They will be more substantial.
Councillor Rudge.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, these new bins are so much better than the old. That picture demonstrates it very clearly. Messy bins that people have to lift up the lid and then put the poo bag in, and they didn't like to do it, so they threw it on the ground. Massive, massive improvement. However, a cunning design ploy, I think. That there's a slight flaw. As an expert dog poo bag picker-upper, as in I pick up other people's dog poo as well as my own, I've noticed that if you're really careless and you throw the bag in, it doesn't drop into the bin, it sticks on the side. And there must be, surely, between us, we can come up with something where you throw it in, it sort of drops, so there's a lip, if you like, over the top of the bin, so it doesn't stop. That's just a personal little plea on my part. Sandra, you can ignore me if you want. The second is, do we have any figures for the efficiency of the recycling bins? Because I do worry that people just put all sorts of rubbish in there, and I don't know whether it's actually recycled or not. Do we have any figures on that or data that could encourage us or not?
Can I go back and check with the team and I'll get you an answer to that question, if that's okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Sadiq.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question about, at the moment you maybe heard about nunnery ward. Yes, there's a big dog mess issue going on, and it's in the news headline as well. And I'm not a councillor there, but I live around, and my neighbours, and they talk about, and it's a big issue, especially by the Nunnerywood High School and primary school kids and families going around. So it's not going on time. Clear dog mess bin, please. Anything you heard about? Any? Thank you.
So Chair, we do have an update on this. An alternative proposal has been put to the county in order to locate a bin at that location, and county officers have committed to going out and looking and considering at that alternative option, and we're all waiting for a reply from county officers.
And I just wanted to add that as chair, I'm very, very cited on this issue as something that's very important to the community, and I've been working very closely with the local elected members, and the alternative suggestion actually came from one of the local elected members who thinks that we might have resolved the issue because there was a little bit of a tension between the county and the city on this particular bin war, I think it is. But I think we're very clear, we cannot afford to lose bins in that location in Nunnery. However, it shouldn't be of a cost to the City Council if it historically hasn't been. And we're not going to back down on that. I'm sorry, Councillor Mace, I actually missed you. I wrote your name down and then missed you. So how could I do that? So we'll come back to you.
That's quite okay. I'm not very memorable. So on a couple of things on public bins. So in the report it says this report, and in the next sentence it also introduces a structured engagement route for elected members to report localised concerns and contribute to ensuring bin infrastructure continues to support community needs under the principle of right bin at right location. I think what I've since realised in this meeting is that just means report it. Because I think I originally read that and understood that to be that there was some sort of structured system coming in to request new bins, but it's actually just reporting where there's overflowing bins. Is that right?
Yes, Councillor, I did respond to you, but you may not have seen my email. It was a typo, so you missed my other one, but you found that one. Yeah, we would encourage everybody to use the Report It app, because that's where we're going to start collecting the data and analysing that.
Thank you. And then my other question was, I understand, at least on the housing estate where I live, that there are bodies that pay the City Council to empty bins for them. At least this is what First Port have told me, and I'm not entirely trusting of what they say sometimes. So there are 2 dog bins on our estate that apparently the City Council are paid to empty. And I'm reticent to mention that there's also 1 black bin that the City Council empties, but apparently we don't pay them to do that. So I was wondering, do we have arrangements with other estates around the city, or is that something that's just unique to mine?
We have historically undertaken work, and I think Nunnery is one that we undertook for county. So I'd need to go back to the team to just check what service level agreement is in place for that one.
And I just wanted to add the bit about Report It, which is why I mentioned it earlier. I do think it's really important. It comes back to the point that Councillor De Serra was saying. We'd all like more bins. It's a big issue for us. There isn't enough money to have lots of new bins. So actually what we as councillors need to do is be very proactive of reporting those overflowing bins so that we do have that data. So we have the data where there are issues, and we also have the data where they're not actually in use, so that we can effectively use the resources. So where there are problem areas, we can redeploy them. and so that we can maximise those resources, because we would just like lots more bins, but we're not in a position where we can have that. So we have to make sure that we have the bins in the right place. The bin investment programme has made a big difference. It has improved the bins, but it's certainly not solved all the issues. And therefore, this is our mechanism to try and resolve those issues as best we can. Anybody else want to? Councillor De Sarah.
Just very quickly, back to dog mess, I'm afraid. Is there a particular or any enforcement about done about dog mess? Are there enforcement officers that will go around and patrol?
Yes, the CEOs are trained in environmental crimes, so they will do dog fouling, littering, fly tipping, untidy gardens, so they're the ones. So if we can have hotspot areas, we'll do the education campaign with the stencils, stickers, etc., but then follow that up after we've done the education with the robust enforcement.
Should I resend the email that requested that for my hotspot areas then? Yeah. I did also send what might have been considered quite a mad idea. It's not my only one ever, but I thought maybe if you as enforcement officers are around, they might have a mechanism to scan the chips in a fouling dog, and then you'd know where the owners lived.
So from an enforcement point of view, you have to witness, just witnessing the dog foul wouldn't be enough for us to be able to take enforcement action. You would need to see somebody with that dog. I know that sounds ridiculous, but there would need to be somebody with. Yeah, it's a technical reason why you wouldn't be able to, but yeah, but in terms of our approach, we wouldn't have the means to be able to scan animals either. So yeah.
Councillor Rudge.
That's really quickly, Chair. How are we saying that when these bins are collected, there are some bins that are clearly very full very often, and some bins that are clearly very empty very often, and that we're looking for new places?
I think from our point of view, we've invested, I can't remember the number, close to £300,000, I think, in new bins, probably less than 2.5 years ago. As the Chair said, that's made some really positive moves, but there seems to be a feeling that they're not best placed. What we don't have is a budget for any additional bins, and we also have a very meagre resource in terms of the Minor Works team for being able to deal with bin requests. They do play areas, they're dealing with benches, they're dealing with lots and lots of work. So our timeliness in being able to respond to that is limited. So I think the message from us is, and the message from the Chair is that if you have reason to believe there are bins that are under capacity, but you've also got bins in your wards that are being underused, it's a matter of looking at where we can swap and re-site rather than dropping any additional new bins.
I think my question is, the people who are collecting the bins, are they giving you that information at the moment and saying, this is nearly always empty?
We get some of that information back, but more often than not, their job is to collect, and bring back to the depot and get rid of. But if we can get smarter around that, then we certainly will. But again, this is where your feedback would be useful as well.
Councillor Hussain.
Thank you. The dog mess is the big issue, especially on Avon and Team Road. I spoke to Jill and sent pictures as well. So is there any fine if the dog owners don't pick up any mess from the road?
Yes, there's a fixed penalty notice, but as Lloyd mentioned earlier, the officer has to witness the dog foul and then the owner walk away without picking up, so it's failing to pick up. But yes, we have got the civil enforcement officers that do the parking enforcement. They will also do environmental enforcement as well.
Thank you.
And again, Karen and I in our briefing discussed this. There was a very successful campaign across the city, which I think it was interesting because it was just when we were all out leafleting a lot, and you'd see a lot of the stencils, so you could see the activity, and you could also see it it was all over the city in all different parts. However, I think there's a recognition of there's a real issue in Warndon at the moment, and I know that Gareth is looking at doing some dedicated work in Warndon and Elby Mount, so you should see things happening, particularly in that area. With her then looking, again, based on use report it, we can't be running that campaign everywhere in all wards as much as we'd all like to it. So I think it's the onus is on us as elected members to make sure the data is there to say this is the hotspot that we next need to target, so that we can actually as a council be data driven. But we do know that Warndon is the issue that needs to be having that targeting now.